Hi, I'm Tim Entwistle from Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria, where I'm Chief Executive and also the Director here at the Gardens. And also I'm President of the International Association of Botanic Gardens. And I'm going to talk to you today about Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria, where I work in Australia, but also about post-COVID horticulture and where we're going now that the pandemic is over and we're working towards what I would call a new normality. So you can see in these first couple of pictures, the focus we have at the Botanic Gardens is for replanting, for setting up some new landscapes. And I think the other thing we need to keep in mind is we're going through a period of climate change as well. So whatever we do at the moment, post-COVID, is also going to have to take that into account as well. I should point out that Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria includes two botanic gardens, one at Melbourne and one at Cranbourne. We call them Royal Botanic Gardens Melbourne and Royal Botanic Gardens Cranbourne. Let me just give you a couple of quick overview pictures of those two botanic gardens. This is Royal Botanic Gardens Melbourne, a spectacular heritage landscape going back to 1846. And Melbourne has a population of over 5 million people. That's out of Australia's 25 million. And it's soon to become Australia's largest city. So it's a very big place. And this botanic garden, as you can see, is very close to the central business district of Melbourne. And it has beautiful, lush landscapes, perhaps a very European style botanic garden, but with many subtropical plants as well. So there are a lot of these trees are from Australia and from northern Australia as well, but a very, very beautiful botanic garden. Alongside that, we have a second garden called Royal Botanic Gardens Cranbourne, which is about 40 kilometres south of the other garden, on the edge of the city, as you can see. And there's a beautiful landscape there called the Australian Garden, and surrounding that, some natural bushland. And I'll talk a bit more about that later in the talk, but just to give you a glimpse or a bit of a quick look, this is what we call the Red Sand Garden, and you can see all the plants in this picture are Australian native plants, and that's all that we grow out at the Cranbourne Garden. So it's quite a different looking garden to Melbourne, but equally spectacular. So if I return now to Royal Botanic Gardens Melbourne and give you a bit of an idea of what it's like, and also then how it's been changing in the last few years. We have a master plan for the whole Botanic Garden, and you can see the map of the site on the right-hand side there. That landscape or that design goes right back to the early years of the Botanic Gardens, and it's about 100, 130, 140 years old. And we don't try not to change that too much. So the paths stay the same, the design stays more or less the same, but we keep adding things to it. Like any good botanic garden, it's always changing, and we're always trying to find new ways to bring people into the botanic gardens. And you can see just over the last decade, I've been here for just over 10 years at the Botanic Garden. We've started to introduce new ways to see the garden. So things like punting on the lake, which gives it a lovely new way to look at the Botanic Garden. So visitors can do that. We've had a children's garden here now for quite a long time before I arrived here, but we've been able to improve that and update that. And it's a special garden for children, not with playgrounds, but with botanical and sort of water features that encourage children to play. We also have what we call a bus or the Gardens Explorer for taking people around the garden so that people with limited mobility can get around and see those botanic gardens. And that's been very important and been a great innovation over the last few years. Then there are new landscapes, and I'll talk about a few of these, but one in our fern gully. So we have this beautiful collection of ferns and palms. It's a very cool part of the gardens and much cooler in the middle of our hot summer than any other part of the gardens. And we're putting new boardwalks around that or through that fern gully to make it more accessible. And I think that's interesting when we're looking post-COVID too, post-pandemic, trying to make ways for more people to be able to get into the gardens. We've also included some wellbeing gardens, so 3 very small gardens for people to enjoy more peacefully. We find the gardens are a place of what we call solace or reflection, and more post-pandemic, we're finding people want areas where they can just sit quietly and contemplate life, and we find creating those a very important part of the Botanic Gardens. Then, of course, the COVID pandemic came through. We had both our sites closed for 15 weeks during that pandemic, and Melbourne, as a city, was one of the most locked down places worldwide. So we had a lot of restrictions in Melbourne, and it was quite severe on the community, but very strong support. Everyone, almost everyone in the whole city was very behind those restrictions. And even when we had to close the gardens for those weeks, they supported that as well. What we were able to do then during the pandemic was build new gardens, and in some ways we had a bit more time and space to do that with less visitors. So we took that opportunity to put new landscapes in, to also reflect landscapes that responded to people's desire to be outdoors and to be experiencing nature, and also responding, as I mentioned at the start, to climate change, so adapting the gardens as well. And this is a sensory garden, so lots of colours and movement, and the bottom left there is a time walk, time as in the herb thyme, T-H-Y-M-E, and you could take your shoes off and walk through there and you smell the herbs and experience that garden as you might not any other kinds of gardens. We also built a new arid garden. Again, it was a COVID project, so we had time to do this, but we also wanted to make it a beautiful, captivating landscape, and of course, adapting to climate change as well. And this terrible picture reflects what we had before COVID. We had somebody destroy some of our cacti. They actually came in and vandalised the garden. So this is what we had, and we decided we wanted to build a new, exciting garden. And that we designed, or Andrew Laidlaw, our landscape architect, designed this lovely new garden. And I'll show you now a few more pictures of that garden, just to give you a sense of how beautiful it is and why it attracts people into the garden. So this is an aerial view again, looking down. You can see that new arid garden in the middle there. And let me take you down closer. And you can see there the cacti, lots of cacti. We were lucky to get a donation of some wonderful collections of cacti and succulents. So we had lots of material, which really helped us make a display that didn't just have one of each species, but had many, and created this really exciting look in the garden. And you can see here at ground level what that looks like. So a much more beautiful garden than before, very open. And that was also part of it too. People, after the pandemic, wanted open spaces where air would be coming through, and they didn't want sort of enclosed gardens. So we were very encouraged to make this an open, free space where people could come through. I should point out, as been mentioning the word free, both our gardens are free to the public, and that was very important in terms of attracting people in, and something very important to us in Australia. Just a couple more pictures of the arid garden to show you how beautiful it is when they flower. Here you can see these lovely small walls and different cacti. So very, very beautiful. And even some little details like having raised gardens as well, more intimate spaces. And people can sit, you can see they can sit on those walls. More places for people to enjoy, more places for people to rest we wanted after COVID as well. And this is how it looks today. I thought just a couple of current pictures. This was only, well, I've got November 2023. That can't be quite correct. Sorry, apologies for that date. But this was a photo taken not that long ago, just showing the beauty of that landscape. This is the more correct date, April. And you can see also, we're not scared to put in other plants with cacti. And these are Australian plants, Dampira, growing here amongst cacti, which are all from the Americas. So anyway, some interesting horticultural decisions made here to create something exciting and interesting. Now, from that arid garden, we're now working, as you can see, the big arrow pointing down, the arid garden at the top there. We've got a thing called Guilfoyle's Volcano, which is not actually a volcano, of course, but it's a garden display with a reservoir in the middle. And we're now working to create more gardens very like that arid garden, but this time with a focus on Australian plants to give people a sense of how Australian plants can be used in drier conditions as well. And just another thing that we've done since COVID is a new gateway with a mosaic. And I put this in because it shows it's very playful, it's fun, but it's also beautiful. And we're making sure that all our new landscapes are doing that as well. We want the gardens to be a fun and attractive place where you can do serious botany, you can learn about plants, but you can also come to just enjoy that wonderful, beautiful landscape. And the White Oak project, I'll just briefly talk about this one, but during COVID, or just before COVID, we had a big old oak tree fall down, a white oak, and we had to decide what to do with that. And I think this is interesting for all botanic gardens. What do you do when you lose a tree like this? Well, normally we would get rid of that wood. We'd bring a truck in, as you can see here, we'd take the wood, wood chip it, and maybe reuse that wood somewhere on site. But we decided instead what we do this time is celebrate the old tree and leave the stump there and leave some of the wood there. So as I show you in this next picture here, you see on the top right there how the tree fell. We came up with a design of how we'd leave the branches in place, and the bottom one shows you we'd cut them a bit shorter, make them more artistic, and then actually leave something there. So this is what it ended up looking like. You can see the trunk still there. You can see the logs around it. You might also be able to see some little plantings in there as well, and I'll get to that in a moment. And if we go closer, you see we've got woodworkers in, a woodworkers guild, as we call them, and they made these lovely sort of joins. So it's an artistic installation, but it also is very much how the tree fell in the gardens. And what that meant was we could then plant new trees, and we planted 3 new oaks, which were climate adapted to Melbourne. That is, they'll survive here when the conditions get hotter and drier, whereas the white oak might not. So we used it to talk about the old tree and to celebrate its life, but to also to start to watch the new trees growing. Interestingly, those 3 new trees are doing really well because we think they're benefiting from the fungi, the mycorrhiza in the old trees. So it's been a lovely project, and this is what it looks like above. You can see how it looks now. And if we go down closer again to that, this is it. You can see we put native grasses as well around those trunks. And what that's become, particularly post-COVID, is a place for people to meet outdoors. And we have school groups there. And we've found more and more people don't want to meet inside buildings now. They'd love to meet outside when the weather is good. So we've created a spot where people just naturally come to meet and talk and learn. And just an example of that, we had the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, come to us, and when he visited, we met with him at the old oak tree. Now, let me finish by talking with a few minutes about Cranbourne Gardens. A beautiful garden, as I said, the Australian garden. I'm not going to talk in as much detail about this, but it's also got some beautiful landscapes. And these are just a few pictures to show you. It's a very new, innovative design, so very different to the Melbourne gardens, and it's always been like that. So there wasn't much to change after COVID. This particular garden had won many awards, about 30 international awards for the design. And as I said before, only Australian plants are being grown in this particular garden. And this is what it looks like. I know I've only got a few minutes left, so let me just show you a few quick pictures. There's sculptural elements to it, beautiful Australian plants, gum trees, wattles, a lot of plants that people would know from Australia. And it's even inspired us to do show gardens overseas. This is one we did at Hampton Court in 2014, based on the Australian garden. So a really wonderful design with wonderful plants. And there's also bushland around the outside of it. So people come to the garden to see that small garden at the top there, 15 hectares, or to walk through the 360 hectares of bushland as well. And in that bushland, there are many, many native species as well. So it becomes a very important place for people to relax and enjoy, particularly after COVID. And this is a detailed slide, so please don't need to take in the detail here, but I just wanted to say that COVID has had an impact on visitor numbers at both sites. And of course, we lost interstate and all international visitors. But what we've found very interestingly is more local visitors, particularly at Cranbourne. The locals discovered they had a botanic garden. A lot of people perhaps didn't know it. And we've had our numbers, you can see at the bottom right, go up from 250,000 to 350,000 per year because of COVID, because they found the garden. At the Melbourne Gardens, where we have nearly 2 million visitors, the numbers have gone up and down a bit. And you can look at this, I won't go into the detail here. It's oscillating back and forward a bit now, but gradually rising back as we get international visitors here. And of course, we have the same kind of master planning and design out at Cranbourne. And I won't go into detail here, but lots of beautiful gardens. And just in recent times, we've opened up, again, an arid garden. You can see the focus on dry or plants that cope with dry conditions at both sites. And this is a beautiful garden with Australian plants. And this is very important, a picnic area, a playground for children. Again, outdoors, children and families can find spaces which they particularly want post-COVID. And just to finish up, I think across both sites, there's a number of projects we've been doing, beautiful, captivating landscapes, as I've already mentioned to you, but also making it easier to visit and more to do and see. So my last couple of slides are just examples of those last 2 points. And one of those is to create new signage, new signs, wayfinding, beautiful, attractive signs so that people can find their way in, find their way there. And we've particularly been focusing on what we call the First Nations culture and a connection to country in Australia. And those new signs are talking about that and also helping people to find their way around the gardens. The other thing that's important, on that too, we're finding people using their phones more, of course, and COVID has allowed people to change over a bit more quickly in Australia to using electronic devices. So our interactive map is getting a lot of use now. And many, many more events. We've had a great giant lightscape event last year, 227,000. This year will be about the same over 6 weeks. It's running now as I speak, actually, 5 days a week in the evenings. Forest therapy, forest bathing, harp meditations. People do want something that's soothing and relaxing. We're finding post-COVID, people particularly want those things where they can just relax in one of the world's or two of the world's most beautiful botanic gardens. And that has meant, and I want to finish here, that's meant that we are an award-winning attraction, that we've won tourism attraction awards for our state, Victoria, 3 years in a row, and for the whole country of Australia last year as well, 2 years ago as well. And I think that's really important, that a botanic garden is winning these awards over the top of, say, museums or art galleries or other major attractions. We can, as a botanic garden, be a major attraction not only to tourists, but to locals who now want outdoor spaces where they can be entertained, enjoy themselves, and relax. So I think post-COVID, we need to do more of what we do well, and we need to do that even better. It's really, really important. Thank you.